Hello, wrestling fans, and welcome to episode 1 of the WrestleReview series, following on from the Black Saturday pilot, which I did about a month ago now. If you didn't hear the pilot, the WrestleReview is essentially what I hope will be a fairly regular series, although it hasn't been so far, looking chronologically back at classic WWE pay-per-views. My name is Nathan Packham, and all I can say is thanks for tuning in wherever you are, and whatever platform you're listening or watching on, whether it be YouTube or SoundCloud. In either case, please like, repost or share if you enjoy this content. And you can also send feedback and comments to WrestleReviewFans@gmail.com. And I might also set up a Twitter and Facebook page if I get some, or in fact any interest in this product that I'm making. So, after the lack of music in the pilot episode, I've decided to add some copyright-free YouTube music, which sounds like a wrestling theme or motif. So this week's music is The Big Beat 80s by Kevin MacLeod and Shrink Star, which sounds like the intro to an 80s wrestling spectacular, and isn't too dissimilar from the generic overdubs on the network version of the event I'm reviewing today. Now, the subject of today is, of course, the granddaddy of them all, the show of shows, the event which started a global phenomenon, WrestleMania I. So yeah, let's get into it. So first of all, I'm just going to give some background information on WrestleMania I. This background today has some resonance to what I've actually already discussed in the pilot episode of WrestleReview, in regards to the Black Saturday event in wrestling history, so be sure to check that out as well. That's available on the YouTube channel and the SoundCloud channel. So basically, yeah, Vince McMahon kind of had a grander vision. Oh, sorry, I should go back here. I should say Vincent Kennedy McMahon had a grander vision for wrestling, which did away with the idea of territories which respected the boundaries of each promoter. As the WWF was not part of the AWA, Vince was unrestricted by this alliance and began to buy up TV slots and talent to begin to grow a truly national and not territorial wrestling company. The WWF ended up hooking up with the emerging MTV platform to promote the Rock and Wrestling Connection. One of the earliest examples of this was Captain Lou Albano's appearance in Cyndi Lauper's Girls Just Wanna Have Fun video, with Cyndi also appearing at various WWF events to feud with Albano, and at WrestleMania I to support challenger to the women's title Wendy Richter. But a little bit more on that later. So, the big draw from WrestleMania I was, of course, Mr. Hulk Hogan. Whatever you think of him, he was an absolutely massive draw, as we know, who'd originally been a heel in the late 70s and early 80s for the WWF. Hogan went to New Japan Pro Wrestling, where he was a massive success. But here, Hogan was not so popular with Vince McMahon's dad, Vince McMahon Sr., if you didn't know, who essentially fired him for appearing in the Rocky III film. So the AWA signed Hogan, but he was very badly managed, and he eventually ended back at the WWF, where he won the title at a house show and signalled the birth of Hulkamania. Get the pythons out. Hogan had a terrible build-up to Mania, to WrestleMania, not Hulkamania, although some people wrongly believe that WrestleMania was going to be called Hulkamania. It was a terrible build-up for Hogan to WrestleMania, where he was sued. He was sued for £5 million for putting Richard Belzer of Hot Properties into a front chinlock. Belzer became unconscious and began to bleed profusely when he hit the floor after Hogan had applied the lock. Luckily for Hogan, well, not so luckily, I don't know how much the settlement was worth, but it was decided out of court, and no further legal action was taken. And then also Hogan and Mr. T, who was part of the Rock and Wrestling Connection, I don't know why, he's not a rock star, obviously, also went on SNL to promote the show, with much greater success than the Belzer incident. Basically, the build-up to Mania, kind of event-wise, centered around 2 MTV shows, so this co-promotion carrying on. First up was the Brawl to End It All, and it didn't actually end it all, because then they had the War to Settle the Score, where there was an absolute shit ton of training montages in relation to Hogan and Mr. T, who, as I've already said, was another pop culture acquisition, but not a rock star. WrestleMania was essentially conceived as a counter to Jim Crockett Promotions' biggest event of the year, Starrcade. It's classic McMahon competition characteristic coming out there. However, WrestleMania was looking like a failure until 1 or 2 weeks before the event, where ticket sales began to rise. So yeah, there's some background information for you on WrestleMania. Now the event itself, we have reached it, the granddaddy of them all. So, in classic 80s style, there is an opening sequence which begins with a montage in space, because everything was big in the 80s, featuring the matches and guest stars that were to feature on this first WrestleMania card. Originally, the montage was accompanied by Phil Collins' Easy Lover, but obviously if you're watching on the WWE Network, there's just generic WWF 80s music afterwards due to copyright reasons. And then everyone's favourite commentary team, Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse Ventura, introduce WrestleMania, and like every pay-per-view from now on, Gorilla makes pains to present the event as the biggest wrestling spectacular of all time, which is actually probably a fair claim to once, to be honest. Good one on you, Jesse. Good one on you, Gorilla. Then the Fink introduces Mean Gene, so Oakland comes on to sing the national anthem, which is different from most other Manias where America the Beautiful is chosen over the Star-Spangled Banner. Gene gives a competent, if slightly nervy performance. Apparently the singing talent they got for the event dropped out. They never actually said who they were going to get. Maybe Michael Jackson, who knows. And this is the first time we're introduced to the Madison Square Garden mic, which will be an awkward ongoing problem as it swings wildly from side to side, and also can be seen in the top of the shot during some matches. So Lord Alfred Hayes introduces us to Tito Santana versus the Executioner, and I said that Mean Gene's performance of the national anthem was awkward. That's nothing compared to how Lord Alfred Hayes is during the whole of this event. So Hayes is very jittery during this opening segment, and he's kind of in this weird no man's land between backstage and the ring. He struggles to look straight at the camera and stumbles over words. Oh, how very British of you, Lord Alfred. So then we cut to some interviews with Tito and the Executioner. Tito states that he knows the Executioner is a big man, but he doesn't know much else. And the Executioner, in something resembling a kind of gimp mask, says that he's going after Tito's leg. And yep, here we go. We are ready for the first WrestleMania match. Tito Santana against the Executioner here. Now, the first thing I noticed when I was watching this was how crazy and wobbly the ropes are in comparison to today's tight and kind of characterless ropes. These really were going all over the place. At the start of the match, the commentators tried to big up the Executioner, who is actually Playboy Buddy Rose, who wrestled primarily in the NWA and AWA. They note his unblemished record, a motif that is somewhat undermined by Tito's domination in the opening moments, which features a hilarious crisscross segment, followed by a backdrop and dropkick by Tito. At this point, the comparison is made between WrestleMania and Woodstock, a fairly accurate one for iconic events which were actually fairly average and poorly organised, but gained huge followings in folklore. So the Executioner performs an uninspiring offense, focusing on the leg he mentioned. He reverses Tito's splash attempt and goes back to the leg, but is sent outside by Tito. And then back in the ring, Tito performs a great flying forearm and ends up winning with a figure four. He probably would have won with the forearm anyway, but decided to go for the submission. What I really was questioning during this match was why the need to have this big build-up for this hapless Executioner, who was frankly quite a terrible wrestler during this match. He had a better reputation when he was in NWA and AWA, but really not here. General conclusion for this match is a fairly standard opener. A few nice moments from Tito, although that crisscross was nauseatingly bad. This one I've given 2.5 stars out of 5, just your general average opener, really. And then we go back to Lord Alfred Hayes, who introduces King Kong Bundy with Jimmy Hart against S.T. Jones. Hayes looks as awkward as ever as he previews this inevitable squash match and sends us to Mean Gene's interviews. So Mean Gene is backstage first of all with S.T. Jones, who says that he's ready to get down with the biggest man in town, repeating get down into incoherent nothingness. And yes, this is the same S.T. Jones who was a tag team jobber with Nick DiCarlo on the Black Saturday broadcast. And Bundy then comes in and states that he's looking for a 5 count, even though he only needs 3. Oh, well, classic WWF 80s. So yeah, here we go, match 2, the inevitable squash match. King Kong Bundy with Jimmy Hart against S.G. Jones. The commentators note that Bundy is close to 500 pounds, even though he clearly isn't. And then Ventura makes this really strange analogy. He says that Bundy's cranium could be used as a drive-in screen, which I just thought was a great kind of surreal image. So the match begins. Bundy performs a bear hug, avalanche in the corner, and a splash for the victory. Now, the squash match is announced at 9 seconds, but unless your sense of time is completely haywire, you'll realise this is horribly inaccurate. The actual time of the fall is said to be, is nearer the 24-second mark. And all I can say for this one is it was a jobbing match with an incorrect time count. So for that reason, it gets half a star out of 5. Sorry to Bundy and S.G. Jones. We go backstage again to Mean Gene, who interviews Ricky Steamboat and Matt Bourne. Bourne states that Steamboat is too nice. Steamboat, who is weirdly next to Mean Gene, replies by stating he'll develop meanness by coming to this area. Now, I'm not even really sure what that means. Does he mean New York, Madison Square Garden, the ring itself, or the WWF? It doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's a kind of a classic incoherent 80s promo. And we move on to match 3, Steamboat against Bourne. The commentary team make pains to emphasise Matt Bourne's position as a second-generation superstar, the son of tough Tony Bourne. But there is no suggestion of the clownish that's quite a mouthful. The clownish antics that were to come in Bourne's career. He was the person who was the most permanent Doink the Clown. Hopefully I'll be able to get to talking about Doink the Clown later on in the series. Steamboat starts with a typically athletic moveset. At one point, he mimics the wobbles of Bourne after an atomic drop. In general, Steamboat looks pretty awesome, to be honest. Probably the steroids. And Bourne also hits a nice belly-to-belly and a conventional suplex. Steamboat eventually picks up the win after a nice suplex neckbreaker and a great crossbody off the top rope. This is certainly the best offering we've seen so far. And really what I was questioning after this was, did Ricky Steamboat ever wrestle a bad match? I've never really seen him wrestle a poor match. And if he has, it's definitely not down to his fault. As I said, a great scientific matchup, if a little bit too short. Overall, this was definitely the best match of the night so far. It gets 3 out of 5 stars from me. So we go back to Lord Awkward Hayes, who introduces us to David Sammartino with his father, Bruno Sammartino, against Brutus Beefcake and Johnny Valiant. This is quite funny because Lord Awkward Hayes starts while Matt Bourne is almost walked in front of the camera shot when he's coming back dejected from the ring. Hayes is then interrupted by Johnny Valiant, who walks past, and I think I can make out that Valiant tells him to wake up, or something along those lines as he goes past. My sentiments exactly, Johnny Valiant. And we cut to, again, Mean Gene interviewing David Sammartino, Bruno Sammartino, Beefcake, and Johnny Valiant. So Bruno warns Valiant not to stick his nose in which Valiant responds to with a bad pickpocket gag about NYC, trying to gain some heel heat there, clearly. Beefcake completely freezes on the big interview stage and blows a raspberry. Valiant covers for him by saying that only he could speak for Beefcake, which is obviously a fairly conventional cover for a wrestler who just completely freezes up and ends up blowing a raspberry. So yeah, great interview technique there, Beefcake. Match 4 then, yeah. Sammartino with Bruno Sammartino. David Sammartino with Bruno Sammartino against Beefcake and Johnny Valiant. So Ventura tries to suggest Brutus Beefcake and Johnny Valiant are father-son, whilst Beefcake takes about 10,000 years to get ready, which Ventura tries to suggest is psyching out, but really, it's probably down to Beefcake's rather elaborate costume, which contains some awesome tights in a purple and black combo. Ventura, who I have to say is very annoying in this match, suggests that this match is so important that the winner will advance to 6 months to 1 year, while the loser will do the reverse. Perhaps there is a time-travelling stipulation, I'm not sure. There's a really interesting discussion of oiling up in this match after Beefcake complains about Sammartino's suspected oil shenanigans. The commentators discuss the advantages and disadvantages of this oiling up. The advantage being that you can slip away from your opponent, and the disadvantage is that the oil gets stuck in the pores. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe they're referring to overheating or something. There's a very nice power slam into an armbar reversal near the beginning, but apart from this is a very slow, methodical match. Sammartino puts Beefcake in every standard hold possible. Beefcake finally breaks this monotony, only for Sammartino to gain control again, and the match really descends briefly into a punching battle, which Sammartino wins with a huge uppercut. Valiant slams Sammartino when he's sent outside, so Bruno gets involved, obviously, and the match ends in complete chaos. Valiant and Beefcake are eventually sent packing by the Sammartinos, and the match is, unsurprisingly, declared a double disqualification. This was another very average match. It's clear to me that David doesn't have any of the ability of his father, and Beefcake is yet to develop his now famous barber gimmick, so not much to get excited about here. I'll give this one 2.5 stars, I would say. Then we go back to Awkward Hayes, who introduces us to Valentine with Jimmy Hart against the Junkyard Dog for the Intercontinental Championship. An even more Awkward Hayes transition occurs here, who starts the link too early. It's just audible if you're listening on the network, and he has to repeat his opening lines. And then on the network version, I'm not sure if this is true of the original, but he's cut off by the interviews with Mean Gene. Poor Alfred Hayes not having a great night. Mean Gene interviews Greg Valentine, Jimmy Hart, and then the Junkyard Dog. Valentine, who had beaten Santana in the build-up to Mania to win the title, says he'll show everyone why he is the Hammer. And the JYD warns Hart, who he refers to as the Weasel, that he's looking for a bone to chew on. A slightly disturbing promo, to be honest. So yes, match 5 for the first championship of the night, the WWF Intercontinental title. Greg Valentine coming in as the champion with his manager Jimmy Hart against the Junkyard Dog. Funny thing here, the network edit has JYD's music overdubbed, probably because they didn't want to pay for the money, with a classic Howard Finkel video game-esque announcing of the Junkyard Dog. And also the Junkyard Dog has thump on his arse. Very interesting. In reference to his thump slam. So JYD starts with an armbar and some risky punches, which of course the heel commentator Jesse Ventura doesn't like. And then JYD starts on his characteristically hard headbutts. Hammer gains the upper hand again, works the leg for the figure 4, performs a half crab, and JYD reverses the start of the figure 4 by delivering 2 huge headbutts again. After this, Ventura states, "The JYD smells victory the way he smells dog food." Now, I'm not quite sure what that means as well. This whole show is just basically an incoherent mess. So Hart tries to get involved, leading to Valentine nailing Hart accidentally, but he still wins with a pin with foot on the ropes, classic heel move. So you think that Valentine has won, but then out comes Valentine's adversary, Tito Santana, who's currently feuding with Valentine. I don't know why they didn't just book the Intercontinental match to be between those two at WrestleMania. He comes in and protests the decision whilst wildly kicking the ropes to indicate what has happened. Somehow, Tito convinces the referee and the match is restarted. And Valentine is counted out by a smiling ref. Oh, no bias then. The JYD wins, but obviously Valentine keeps the belt because it can't change via countout, leading to Monsoon proclaiming, rather hilariously, that Valentine is still the reigning Intercontinental Championship. Well, there's some transmorphification there for you. This is another... Is that even a word, transmorphification? I better look that up. This is another distinctly average match, although the pop the JYD gets off the crowd was amazing to see. This, for me, is another 2.5 star match. Not a great deal to get excited about, once again, and this is really going to be a theme that carries on for the rest of the show. Next up, we've got Alfred Hayes again introducing the next match. We've got the US Express against the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. Hayes remains awkward, frightened, and jumpy as the Iron Sheik, Volkov, and Blassie walk past him. Volkov and the Sheik were looking to win the titles off Rotundo and Wyndham in this match, who had won it off, if you remember from Black Saturday, Adrian Adonis, or Adonis, as the announcer said back then, and Dick Murdoch. So Mean Gene interviews the US Express with Lou Albano, followed by the Iron Sheik, Volkov, and Freddie Blassie. The Iron Sheik hilariously says Gene Mean rather than Mean Gene, before Volkov says he will conquer the tag team champions, classic USSR there, in the 80s. Albano rather strangely holds a cider can as Barry Windham states that we're going to the ring right now, even though this interview is clearly pre-taped and the US Express are in shirts and jeans. So yeah, time for match 6 of the evening. It's the US Express, Mike Rotundo and Barry Windham, who are the tag team champions, with Lou Albano, versus the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov for the WWF tag team titles. Volkov comes to the ring, does his classic Russian national anthem routine as one protester's can hits that infamous Madison Square Garden microphone. And then the Iron Sheik chants, "Iran #1!" To loud boos. Classic stereotyping here by the WWF, who place Iran and Russia together, even though they were opposed at the time. I think the Russians were supplying Iraq. And don't forget also that the Iranian Iron Sheik was the pro-Iraq Colonel Mustafa during the Sergeant Slaughter heel turn a few years later. I mean, it's just hilarious, really. Comical. The US Express come out in US attire, which ironically looks to be bearing a modern-day Russian flag on it. If you are watching the show along with this, then you'll be able to see that. It's interesting to note that Rotunda and Wyndham's original theme was Real American, so what would become Hogan's theme. So we start the match, and Rotunda comes out of the blocks with energetic offense, including a beautiful dropkick, somewhat going against his somewhat stiff IRS gimmick later on. The Iron Sheik later on hits Volkov with a dropkick accidentally. Those boots of the Sheik have really got to hurt. Ventura could, because they're kind of, they look a bit like clown boots. They look pretty cool though, but they must hurt. Ventura continues to make annoying statements like, "You see dead Super Bowls, you've seen dead series, but you've not seen a dead WrestleMania." Well, no, you're just seeing a distinctly average one, to be honest with you, Jesse. Sheik and Volkov really build some offense. The crowds are desperate for a hot tag, and boom, they get the tag. Wyndham comes in like a house on fire, hitting a bulldog, which signals the breakdown of the match. The Sheik is sent outside while the ref is distracted, and Wyndham is hit with a cane by the Iron Sheik. Down for the count, Volkov pins him. 1, 2, 3, and we have new tag team champions. Lou Albano kicks the ropes like Santana, but his protests are ignored by the ref, probably because the ending had nothing to do with ropes in general. And it's interesting that the word of wrestling veteran Lou Albano isn't taken into consideration by the ref, but if it's Tito Santana, it's open season. This was definitely best match of the night, some strong technical wrestling in this, and a well-choreographed heel victory. Certainly the best match of the night, this tag match, and it gets the top rating for the night from me of 3.5 stars out of 5. So we get a post-match interview with Blassie, Volkov, and the Iron Sheik. Blassie denies the use of, or even the ownership of, a cane, and the Iron Sheik says Gene Mean again, before suggesting that US immigrants are better than the real American population. What I obviously put American in quotation marks, because that's a ridiculously racist thing to say. Alfred Hayes introduces the next match, which is Big John Studd with Bobby Heenan versus Andre the Giant in a $15,000 body slam challenge. Hayes states that Big John Studd thinks he is the one true champion giant, whilst Andre says he is the giant. Oh, Lord Alfred, dearie dear. The stipulation here being that Andre must retire if he loses. Then we go to Mean Gene's interviews. Well, actually, it's only an interview with Big John Studd this time, Big John Studd shows off the gym bag containing the money, which is randomly constantly referred to as a briefcase. Mean Gene tries to grab his share and is apprehended by Heenan. Heenan suddenly realizes that he'll have to deposit the money if Studd wins, and thus more than 2 people will see the money if the bank clerk takes it away. Talk about a clunky promo. And Mean Gene has also seen the money himself, don't forget, so already 3 people have seen it, let alone all the people in Madison Square Garden who are going to. So, yeah, match 7, Big John Studd with Bobby the Brain Heenan against the 8th wonder of the world, Andre the Giant, in a $15,000 body slam challenge. We get some early chops and headbutts from Andre that send Studd to the floor, after which Andre chokes Studd while the ref just simply watches on. He's like, oh, well, it's Andre. He can do what he wants. Andre is described as a methodical wrestler. This is a very apt description for one so slow at this point. And you have to remember, this is actually 2 years before his Mania main event appearance. Imagine how much kind of his muscles and bones has seized up by then. There's a bear hug that lasts an eternity, a few punches, and a terrible neck submission, which is essentially a neck hug. Andre performs some hilarious kicks designed to wear Studd down. They sort of look like mini enziguris, but obviously he can't raise his foot that high because, well, he's just a very slow, lumbering giant, before slamming Studd out of the corner to win the money. So it's a victory for Andre. Andre begins to throw money into the crowd before Heenan steals the bag, which is still described as a briefcase at this point, and runs to the back. I was left wondering in this match why it was such a task for Andre to slam Studd, and what exactly the time limit was for the slam before Andre had to retire. They just seem to gloss over that fact because of the inevitability of Andre's victory. So Andre's undefeated streak remained unscathed, but this was a pretty horrific match. And apart from the Heenan bag still, that was about the only nice spot. I've given this one just a 1 out of 5 stars because it was shocking, as most big man matches are, even nowadays. Cut to the back where Andre has finally got there for an interview with Mean Gene. Andre, in his almost imperceptibly deep voice, states that he really showed the weasel and Big John Studd, before Ventura describes the moment as the slam heard around the world. Worth remembering that, because that would be a phrase used again later against Andre at WrestleMania 3. And we're back with Lord Alfred, who introduces Leilani Kai with the Fabulous Moolah against Wendy Richter with Cyndi Lauper for the WWF Ladies Championship. They were ladies back then. Lord Alfred can't seem to take the fact that Moolah has kissed him, stating, "Good gracious," or maybe "good luck," and announces this as the first Rock and Wrestling Connection match before cutting to the pre-match interviews. Before I move on, just a little bit of background on this match, because there's quite a bit of hype around this one. Richter had defeated Moolah, who is the manager of Leilani Kai in this match, at the MTV co-promotion event, the Brawl to End It All, before Leilani Kai won it back with Moolah at the War to Settle the Score. Yeah, a little bit confusing, isn't it? So Mean Gene interviews Leilani Kai, Moolah, and then Richter and Lauper. Oh, sorry, actually, it's the other way around. It's Lauper and Richter first. Lauper repeats the word powerful about 20,000 times. He's like, "It's a powerful woman, you're coming against powerful. Into incoherence, before Wendy Richter argues she lost the belt not to one, but 2 people due to Moolah's interference. Moolah is interviewed in terrible, tacky 80s $ glasses on. I mean, how very Reagan-esque is that? It really is. And Leilani Kai has some horridly stereotypical Hawaiian regalia on herself. And now it's time for match 8. Yes, so as I've already said, Leilani Kai, the reigning women's champion, with the Fabulous Moolah against Wendy Richter and Cyndi Lauper for the Ladies' Championship. Lauper comes out looking characteristically mad, a sort of bobbing, jumping run she does to the entranceway with her crazy dyed hair. She's also accompanied by her manager, David Wolf, so the manager also has a manager. Richter applies a hammerlock at the start of the match, and Kai seems to be violently tapping or slapping the floor. But like the Andre choke earlier, the ref simply ignores this. The match is then taken up by minute after minute of hair-grabbing maneuvers, with Moolah getting involved with the hair-grabbing as Lauper tries to half do something about it. She just kind of half gets involved, but doesn't really. And the first real bit of action sees Richter put Kai on her shoulders for what the commentators think is going to be an aeroplane spin before she simply drops Kai on her back. Richter then performs a splash, but only gets a 2 count, before Kai gets the upper hand back, performing a few standard power slams. However, her crossbody from the top rope is reversed very badly. This is a huge botch by Richter, who eventually gets into a poor pinning position for the 1, 2, 3. Your new ladies champion is Wendy Richter. Moolah trips over the ropes as she tries to come in, flops like a fish to the map in a dive, which is even worse than a modern-day footballing simulation. Now, there's very little to get excited about again here, with all the hair grabbing really, and the botch finish didn't help the situation at all. But it's kind of worth a watch just for that strange slam that Richter does that the commentators think is going to be an aeroplane spin. And it happens about halfway to 3/4 of the way through the match. I've only given this one 2 stars out of 5. Far too much hair grabbing. And I would have liked to see Lauper get involved more than she did. Maybe she was supposed to, but they just screwed it up. Then we cut backstage where Richter and Lauper are... well, actually, they're not there initially because Ventura and Monsoon state that Richter is backstage, even though her and Lauper are still obviously filing through the entranceway, which is mad with, I think it's police officers and security guards, I think because it's Cyndi Lauper, and they're like, oh no, Cyndi, girls just wanna have fun. So, Ventura has to fill in before they arrive to Mean Gene. When they do eventually arrive, Lauper states that Wendy Richter has more Olympic ability, even though she's not an Olympic athlete, I don't know why she said that, in her little finger than Leilani Kai has in her whole body. They also call Kai Phi, I don't know why, that's not even an insult, is it? And cow. Then I just want to go, before the main event, I want to go into some background of Hulk Hogan and Mr. T with Jimmy Snuka against Paul Orndorff and Rowdy Roddy Piper with Bob Orton. So the build-up to this had featured incidences such as Piper infamously hitting Snuka, I think with a coconut on Piper's pit. This led to Piper recruiting Bob Orton as his bodyguard in the build-up to the event as he began to speak out against the rock and wrestling connection, even though Mr. T isn't a rock star, as I've said before. An opinion which completely riled Hogan. So Hogan and Piper feuded, with Hogan retaining the belt via DQ at the MTV event The War to settle the score. That was the background information. Now we get a very extended build-up to this match with so many guest celebrities, it's ridiculous. There's actually virtually been no mention of this main event during the show and no video promo like now, but here it is, the build-up to your main event. The guest ring announcer for this is introduced, and it's baseball superstar Billy Martin, who, like a number of people during the night, struggle with the MSG swinging microphone, and there's a crowd member actually that screams out, "Speak up, Billy!" Next to be introduced is the guest timekeeper, and it's Liberace, who does a characteristically showbiz dance routine with Manhattan dance troupe The Rockettes. After a mic problem, again, or from Martin's incompetence, we're introduced silently, really, to float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, boxing megastar, and possibly the greatest sportsman of all time, bar Perry Saturn, of course. It's Muhammad Ali! Then Piper comes out, finally we're getting somewhere with the match, with an army of bagpipes, along with Orndorff and their manager Orton. Hogan, Mr. T, and Snuka enter from the back, and T is wearing that kind of awesome pajama/boxing attire that a lot of boxers wear. Hogan crazily rips off T's shirt once they're in the ring, and T looks very confused for a moment as to what's happened before getting into kind of the hype of the main event. Orton breaks a stick to try and psych out the faces for this match, and Liberace rings a simply fabulous bell to begin the main event. So yes, here is match 9, your main event of the evening. Hogan and Mr. T with Snuka against Orndorff and Piper with Bob Orton. The match takes absolutely ages to get going as both teams tag each other, even though there's no need to, due to the fact that no contact has been made in the opening moments. Piper and T go nose to nose before exchanging slaps. Piper tries to out-wrestle T, and Monsoon announces that Piper is riding him. Very interesting. T gets back on top with the fireman's carry before slamming Piper to the mat. Piper is incensed by this, and chaos ensues, with outside referee Muhammad Ali also having to get involved. That was probably the spot they wanted to do to get Ali involved in some way. Orndorff and Piper call for a timeout as referee Pat Patterson, yes, the Pat Patterson, who managed to get a paycheck at a number of shows during this time for doing menial tasks such as being the ref, begins the count-out. Obviously the heels come back in because that would be a ridiculous end. And they're given a double noggin knocker by Hogan, who builds offense on Piper. T comes back in and performs a slam and actually a really awesome hip toss. He does a really good job with this. But Hogan has to come back in, sends Piper over the top with a big boot, with Orndorff then interfering to send Hogan outside. Piper then hits Hogan with a chair, but Patterson just ignores it because who needs disqualifications in such a huge main event? Kind of like how often when there was the Attitude Era, how Earl Hebner would ignore when wrestlers were using chairs and such during the main event. The heels perform a double atomic drop as Patterson struggles to keep control, not of his paycheck, of the match, I mean, as we build up to T's hot tag, which arrives when Orndorff misses a flying knee. Then Hogan makes another tag in, but T is ambushed by the heels, Hogan makes the tag to T. He's ambushed by the heels, and Hogan is needed again. I think T's only in here for a very short time because he obviously has a limited moveset. But this momentum is short-lived again. Oh my god, so many tags in this match. After Piper tries to get involved illegally, Orton and Snooker interfere with Snooker hitting Orton with a headbutt as we break down to build to the big finish. Orton barely sells this headbutt and ascends to the top rope to hit Hogan with a cast. But T tackles Piper out of the way, who was going to be, I guess, holding Hogan the other way. And Hogan spins round so that Orton hits Orndorff with the cast, accidentally, for the 1, 2, 3. The winners of your main event, Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. Roddy Piper hits Paycheck Patterson, I've called him Paycheck Patterson here instead of Pat Patterson, in frustration. And Orndorff goes batshit crazy when he retains consciousness. Hogan, T, and Snooker celebrate with Liberace, Ali, and Snooker. Oh, sorry, just with Liberace and Ali. There's not two Snookers. This wasn't exactly a scientific wrestling match, but it was fairly competent entertainment. The ending was well choreographed, especially Mr. T's tackle/save, and then the cast shot. Great entertainment value, loads of pop culture icons in here. Not the best wrestling match as such, but it still gets 3 out of 5 stars from me. So we cut backstage to Mean Gene, who interviews Hogan, T, and Snooker. T says his usual stuff about how tough, strong, and not a wimp you have to be a wrestler, or do seemingly anything in life if you go by Mr. T's mantras. And then Hogan states something hilarious. He's like, "Well, you know something, Mean Gene? What really turned me on was training with a dude." Perhaps undermining his real American patriarchal character ever so slightly. And then the event sadly comes to an end. Yes, folks, we've reached the end here. Jesse Ventura and Gorilla Monsoon sign off for the evening, and they seem smug as fuck. The event is clearly a massive success, even if the action is distinctly average. We end with photo highlights, which repeat themselves a couple of times and also jolt badly at points. The original end theme during the video highlights was Axel F by Harold Faltermeyer. You know the used for the Crazy Frog. But this is changed to generic 80s music on the network. So yeah, it's time to conclude, really. I can't believe we reached the end almost of this review as well. So yeah, WrestleMania I is a bit like Freud in psychology and Elvis in rock and roll. These icons were crucial starting points in their respective industries and cultural milestones, but compared with what came after them, they simply don't match up. Sorry to Elvis and Freud fans out there. The standout match for me is the well-choreographed and well-wrestled tag team titles match. Steamboat and Bourne in the main event are also competent bouts. One is a nice, short, technical bout, and the other is just an enjoyable pop culture fest, really. The rest of the show, though, is distinctly average, with a lot of 2-star and 2.5-star matches, with the awful Bundy squash and Andre versus Stud in the $15 million challenge, $15,000 challenge, should I say, bringing up the rear. The MVP for me was probably the Iron Sheik, mainly for those great clown boots, and also how he played his part in the tag match. And the worst performer has got to be John Studd, who barely had any offense in the $15,000 slam challenge with Andre. When rounded up and given an average, the average score for this event was 2.27 out of 5 stars, rounded up to 2.5 out of 5 stars. The correct average rating for a hugely important but ultimately mediocre wrestling extravaganza. So let's just kind of have a bit of an aftermath to the event. The official attendance registered at Madison Square Garden was 19,121, which was a big number considering how ticket sales had only really picked up with about a week and a half or 2 weeks to go. The event was also the largest closed circuit event up to this point, with 380,000 fans watching through this medium. However, in typically calamitous WWF style, there was fury in Pittsburgh when a technical glitch stopped the broadcast. Fans pelted garbage at the screen, and eventually the event was shown in Pittsburgh homes to satisfy demand after the problems. A figure was also released suggesting that 1.2 million worldwide had watched the spectacular, although you never really know with Vince figures. In terms of the wrestling aftermath of the event, the actual substance and the stuff we're interested in, after feuding with Valentine and interfering in his match with the JYD, Tito Santana would take the title back in a cage match after WrestleMania. In the tag team division, the US Xpress would win the titles back 3 months later from Sheik and Volkov, with Brutus Beefcake and Greg Valentine the tag team champs after this. After the $15,000 slam challenge, Andre and Studd continued to feud after Mania, with Studd joining forces with Bundy and Andre. Studd was with Bundy and Andre got Hogan as a tag partner. Hogan and Bundy, of course, would face each other at the next WrestleMania. In the women's, or ladies' division, Moolah won the title back as the Spider Lady. I think she put a mask on, not quite sure. A decision unknown to Richter, who left the company in controversy after the screw job, with Moolah holding the title for 2 more years. Snore. In terms of the main event aftermath, Piper would train Orton as a boxer to face Mr. T, and T won their fight at Saturday night's main event. Before Piper and T continued to feud, leading to their boxing match at WrestleMania II. So yeah, that just about wraps it up for today. Thank you for listening to this edition of the WrestleReview podcast. Like and subscribe if you're tuning in from YouTube. Repost and share on SoundCloud. And please send your feedback to the email address WrestleReviewFans@gmail.com. Next time we'll be looking at the Wrestling Classic, a tournament which ultimately decides very little, but has some hilarious moments worth focusing on. Thank you for listening in, and I hope to see you around again for episode 2 of WrestleReview. See you later, guys.